All right, good morning. Welcome to winter camp training. My name is Greg Payne, and we'll get started here. I went over it a little bit before, but just a few things for everybody. If you need to use the restrooms and you haven't been here before, they're right down the hall. Feel free to get up at any time. It's not a problem. We will have some breaks throughout, but if you gotta go, that's fine. We'll be doing some online quizzes today, so you'll need access to the internet. And if you're having trouble getting a signal down here, there is a Wi-Fi here. You can see where it says Scouts 5G or Scouts 24, and the password is Good Life, all lowercase, all one word, no spaces. If you have problems getting on the internet, let me know. We'll figure it out. Question?
You don't have access to it.
Do you have a phone or a tablet or anything? No, I'll get you set up. We'll help something here for you. Anybody else not have a device or a phone or anything?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Aldo or? Okay, I'll tell you what, let me on my back here. We'll get you set up here. Can you grab that other one from the car too? Yeah. Okay. So, what we're gonna be talking about today, like any good scout presentation, we gotta talk about first aid. We're gonna cover clothing, what to wear, maybe what not to wear. Talk about food and cooking gear. Cover sleeping bags, since if you think about it, you're gonna be spending a lot of your time in your sleeping bag. Talk about how to build a fire. It's a little bit different. Talk about setting up campsites. How to set up, pick up tents, and then also we'll cover snow shelters, because if you get good enough weather, that might be something you want to try. So first off, we're gonna try something different here. We're gonna go through some group questions. So if you guys want to divide into some little groups here, I'll pass out some questions and here, and let's see. There's a pen. So maybe if we make groups of about 7 people or so. All right, so go ahead and take a couple of minutes here, and we'll go over the first question that's on the paper, just as a group. Write down a couple answers, and we'll go over those. Okay, so hopefully you guys had a chance to write down a few things, just mostly just to kind of spark discussion. So anybody got any answers on that first question? CJ.
Refreshing our skills that we've already learned in the past, and then also how to build shelters and how to get certified to go winter camping.
Sounds good. Anybody else? Somebody else must have some answer.
How to make a snow shelter, how to make a fire, how to stay warm, and how to
Oh, excellent answers. Okay. Anybody else? All right. Well, we'll get started on. Thank you. So, that work then? Okay, thanks. You can just. So the first thing you might ask yourself is, why go winter camping? And does anybody have any ideas on that? We talked about some just here in. Yeah, lots of fun. That's one. Anybody else?
practice our winter skills.
Anybody else? Good.
Learn how to build a snow fort, maybe.
Sounds good. Yeah. All right. So let's. So one of the reasons you might not think about is that around here, if you're not going to go winter camping, your camping season is going to be really short, right? Because you think about winter around here, that's a good at least 3 months out of the year. And if you cut that time out, now you're down to 9 months, maybe 8 months. So you can extend your camping season. Another thing that you might not think about is not just building snow shelters and things like that, but you can get out and do things that you can't do the rest of the year, like going skiing or sledding. So you want to, when you think about your winter camping trips, you want to incorporate those ideas as well. It shouldn't just be all about building snow shelters. You want to have fun. So think about that. Another one is new challenges. It is a little bit different than just going backpacking in the summertime. There are things you got to think about that in the summertime, you don't have to worry about. And then last, because we're all scouts, we want to be prepared. And so the things for winter camping also apply to if you're going on a hike in the wintertime, for example, not just winter camping. So there's some good skills there. Just as kind of a picture here, the gentleman on the right there is Brian Conklin, who used to present this with me. So we want to put that in there. He used to be in the Navy, and his winter camp was at the North Pole. So the whole point of this is to train scouts and scouters to be ready for winter camping, to be safe and have fun at the same time. In the past, they used to try to have, or used to have kind of more scary things. They have newspaper clippings about scouts getting lost in the snow. I'm not going to spend time on that, but that's something we want to avoid, obviously. So this winter camping here for the BMC has been going on for, this slide is actually a few years old, so probably more like 30 plus years. It was started back a long time ago by three gentlemen, and it's been reworked a little bit over the years, but this is a program that's been going on for quite some time. So one of the things that people come to winter camp that are camp training that we haven't talked about is to get the winter camp patch. So I've got one of them here. And we'll talk a little bit more about the patch itself. And there's two requirements to earn this patch. Number one is to take this class, that's what you're doing right now. Number two is to go out and have a winter camping experience. And that could be something like Klondike Derby, which Bill's gonna talk about in a minute. It could be just camping with your troop. So that's kind of up to you guys how you fulfill that second part. And once you've earned the met the requirements to earn the patch, you can contact the council to your scoutmaster to get the patches for you. This is kind of the old school patch here that you can see on the screen. This is the slightly newer version that I have here. This one you probably won't see too much. In addition to the patch itself, you can earn rockers that go around the outside of the patch. And so you can kind of see those here around the edge there. And so I'll do the easy one. There's camping in a storm, which is just what it says. So if you go out camping and you have a really severe snowstorm or an ice storm, that's a little rocker. There's one where you camp below 0. I've got that one, although I've never sewn it on. That's really cold. We got down to -4 and it was at Randall Martin. So that's something you can do. And then the last one is a little bit different. It's nights below freezing. So freezing is 32 degrees. So if you go camping and it's 30 degrees out, you get what's called 2 frost points. And as you collect those, if you get enough of them, you get 100 frost points. That's one rocker. I have that one. The next level after that is actually 250 degrees of frost points. I know a couple people that have that. So you really got to get out there quite a bit to earn that rocker. So next up, I've got a slide here about Klondike Derby, but I'm going to ask Bill to come up and talk about it. Briefly, I'll say it's kind of like a camporee in the wintertime, but Bill's going to provide a lot more information.
He's exactly right. Klondike is winter camping, but it's a contest. We have 10 stations that are all tenderfoot, second class, first class skill stations. Plus, you got to spend a night in the cold, snow. We want you to build a snow cave, get inside. How cold is it inside an ice cube?
32 degrees.
So how cold can it be outside?
Way, way colder.
That's a number? Is that a math equation?
Well, outside of the snow, it can range from whatever temperature the weather is, but as soon as you're inside the snow, it will always be a rough 32 degrees unless wind is coming in from the outside.
What happens if 2 people crawl inside a snow cave?
You have a lot more body heat, so it'll get warmer.
And then you light a candle
Then you're sweating.
and you're dripping wet. So you're not going to freeze to death if you take a 0-degree bag and you put a ground cloth and insulation underneath you. So we want you to experience that. We also want you to drag something that makes it an arduous journey, a snow sledge. Once you have to work and sweat between stations, you're going to tie knots. You're going to cook a pancake on top of the snow without melting the snow. Let that soak in for a while. How do you do that? You'll learn. You're going to do some first aid. So if you got a new best friend or somebody you don't like, they're the ones who are going to be your victim. Broken legs, hatchet wounds. You're going to try and find your way snowblind in a blizzard. How do we make a blizzard? How many get those red neckerchief things on? You're going to be blind wearing your neckerchief. You're going to learn cooperation, teamwork, leadership from in front and from behind. Figure that one out. I'm not going to tell you the answer to that quiz. And everything is based around Robert W. Service's poetry. I love the list. Poetry. Robert W. Service, the Bard of the North. You're gonna have to look him up. He sold poems. The strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who toiled for gold. Never heard that?
I have-
Well, you will on Klondike. So tell your scoutmaster about it. Come have fun. And I offer this to the scoutmasters. If you're uncomfortable and you're thinking on the edge, I will come to your troop meeting and give a presentation personally about it. I'll do all the skills. Yes, sir.
Do you guys provide the sled, or is that something?
No.
you build?
No, but this is all available. This manual is available on the BMC website. You can download it for free, and there's simple plans. If you Google Boy Scout Snow Sledge, SLEDGE, you'll get 400,000 different plans. So it's how creative you want to be. And you're judged on the beauty and quality of your sledge. They make them out of PVC. They make them out of lumber. They make them out of electrical conduit. They make them out of ship's ropes like this big around with old skis underneath. The craziest stuff I've ever seen, but they all work. So it's a cargo carrying device. It's not a slide down the hill and bash your lips and get bloody teeth, which you'll do too. But, so, Scoutmasters, my information's on the website. Sign up. Klondike is fun. And we give out Gregory's patches to everybody who attended today and shows up there. We will have the patches for you. So, sign up, Klondike.
All right. Thanks, Bill.
I want to start my foot.
So we're talking a lot about gear today, and one of the things I want to say is you don't need to rush out and buy things just because I've got it up on the table and it looks cool, or that's a neat tent, I gotta have one of those. One of the things is that winter camping is a little bit shorter, so you know you don't want to spend an awful lot of money necessarily buying stuff that you're not going to use a lot. And some of the things that you have already, you can use or combine them together to make them better for winter camping. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So you might already have a lot of the materials and things you need to go winter camping without buying some fancy new things. Lastly, if you've got old stuff, you might want to take a look at newer things that have come out in the last 20 years as far as materials for winter camping. There's some of the stuff that's improved quite a bit. The biggest thing I will mention probably is some of the chemicals that they use, especially for waterproofing. They're getting away from the kind of forever chemicals. So if that's a concern, I think in the last few years, you'll start to see things coming out that don't have those and have kind of alternative coatings for materials. Gear sources, there's most of these probably you know. Looking around, I'll say Big Five. Brian Conklin, who used to teach this with me, was a big proponent of Big Five because you can sign up online and every week they'll send you a special deal, and he scored, I think, like a 0 degree bag once for $20 because it was the deal of the week, plus they had some coupons. So there are things out there that you can find. You don't have to rush out and buy the most expensive thing just to have for one camp out. One of the things I'll mention is Costco. Unfortunately, usually they start in August. I don't know why, but they seem to have they have some pretty decent things that you can use for cold weather camping. And you might still be able to find some now. I noticed they still have some of the gloves and hand warmers there. Joe.
Another good one is Griggs over in Pasco. They have an excellent outdoor section, and they're another place you can get, especially packs,
Yeah.
fairly cheap.
And if you're willing to deal with the hassle, REI usually has a sale on used equipment every year. Sometimes the line goes out the door, and it's a bit of a wait. It's kind of a bit of hit or miss, but you can score some pretty good deals there. It's lightly used material.
I've gotten a lot of things on the REI used online.
Yeah.
So Greg, Alps Engineering, Alps
Yeah.
Mountaineering out of Missouri, they started a new secondary website called Hiker Direct,
Oh.
just for scouts.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this
Take
tent
this
here, I
guy.
think is an Alps tent. So yeah, that's good to know. Huh. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the next question on that sheet of paper for the group. So you can take about 4 minutes here and kind of work on that, and we'll discuss the answers.
One way to
Okay, so, what do we got? Anybody want to volunteer?
We got hand hormones, anti-subject, liquid IV, Pedialyte, electrolytes, YAP, and moleskin.
Okay.
You'll need to know all of your basic first aid procedures that are in your, what are there? Scout their first class ranks, plus specifics such as hypothermia, shock, and frostbite, as well as any other winter related first aid things you can think of.
Okay. Anybody else? Oh, Joe?
Burns, oddly enough.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll jump right into it. Those are all good answers. So, like I said before, any scout training, you gotta have first aid. It's kind of the boring part, but it's kind of the important part too, when you think about it. So, first thing that you gotta really think about during winter camping is dehydration, which is not something you would normally kind of think. You know, for me personally, dehydration, you think, oh, I'm in this hot summer sun and I'm sweating a lot, so I'm losing water. But in the wintertime, you actually lose more water than you would think. And a lot of times when we go winter camping, we're going up places that are higher elevation, and you tend to lose more water the higher up you go. So dehydration is something that you need to think about, even though you think, oh, I'm cold, I must be keeping water. So, does anybody know some of the symptoms of dehydration? CJ.
Faint lightheadedness.
There's a boy.
Just slowing their speech.
Yeah, that can be one. Anybody else? We're back there?
Okay.
Yeah. Let's see, can you catch that? All right, one more. Being sore. I'm not sure so what it can be, but I think we let it go too far. All right, we're gonna keep moving on. I've got lots more candy, so. So some of the things, obviously, extreme thirst. If you start feeling kind of parched or thirsty, the obvious one is less frequent urination. So if you're not going to the bathroom enough, that's a really good sign. And if you do go to the bathroom and urine is kind of dark colored rather than light or lemonade, then that means you need to drink more water. Fatigue is one. So if you're feeling a lot more tired, maybe you're not doing too much, but you're still feeling tired. Dizziness, so can't stand up straight. And confusion would be another one, like, I'm not really sure why I'm here. What are we doing? So the obvious solution to dehydration is water, right? You need to drink more water. And so this is something you need to think about in winter camping is bringing along more water so that people have something to drink. And so you want to think about, drinking, Nalgene is 1 quart. So really in the wintertime, you want to be looking at like 3 to 4 of those a day, spaced out over the day. One of the things you might think about too, is if your Nalgene bottle is like this and you left it out in the snow, what do you think is going to happen to it? Freeze, right? So this is one solution that you might look for, or this is something that you could possibly make as a project, is a water bottle insulator. So you can see that this will keep it from freezing. It'll still get cold for at least a day or two. After about 2 days, this is, even with this insulator, it's still going to freeze. But this is kind of a simple thing that you can put around your water bottle, keep it from freezing. And another thing you can think about, if you're going backpacking and you're going to bring like a water filter, those have to be kept above freezing because the little micropores and fibers inside, when those freeze, they crack, and the filter will look like it's working. Water will go through it, but it doesn't filter enough.
Another cheap idea for if you don't want to get a water bottle insulator is just to store your water bottles upside down, because ice rises and therefore it will only freeze on the top, thereby refusing to freeze your lid.
Yeah. That's a good point. Another thing you can do is tuck your water bottle into your coat or, next to your body, so your body heat keeps it warm.
I know another decent option, just get a pre-insulated cup.
Yeah, so that's a good point. Thanks. So if you have a bottle like this, this is another Costco special. This is insulated normally to keep things cold or warm, but it will work to keep the water inside from freezing. So that's another possibility. It's a little heavier than something like an Nalgene, but it's a great example there. And last I'll say, it's usually easier to bring your own water with you or have a water source nearby. You'd think that melting snow would be the way to go, but it uses a lot of energy, number one. Number two, you have to have you take a lot of snow and you melt it and you end up with just a little bit of water. So it's something you can do, definitely in an emergency or survival situation, that's the way to go. But if you have the choice, I would recommend bringing your own water along or having a hose or water source nearby.
I've heard that melting ice is better because it's denser and it has more water content.
Yeah, melting ice is okay. The thing is that you have to use a lot of fuel. So especially if you're doing something like, if you're car camping, not a problem. You can do that because you're gonna have probably a big, container of fuel. But if you're backpacking, that's more fuel that you're gonna have to bring with you. So, something to think about. All right, so hypothermia. I think everybody's heard the hypothermia before, but the definition of that is your body's losing heat faster than your body can make heat. So, your temperature starts falling below 95 degrees, and everybody knows normal body temperature is 98.6 or thereabouts. And one of the things that years ago that I was surprised to find out, you can get hypothermia up to temperatures of about 50 degrees. So normally we think winter camping and we think hypothermia, you think you're out in the cold and it's below 30 and freezing. It's something that can happen on a nice day. Even the sun could be out. You could be hiking Badger Mountain, and it could be like 40 degrees, and maybe the wind comes along. You can get hypothermia there. So it's not something that just has to be wintertime, or sorry, snow time. Another thing about hypothermia is if you find one person in your group or patrol or troop that has hypothermia, chances are somebody else might as well, because you're all out in the same environment, doing the same kinds of things. So if one person has it, that's a warning sign that you should check everybody else. So anybody else some symptoms of hypothermia?
Uncontrolled shivering.
Yeah, that's the classic one right there.
I would probably say, like very cold skin.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. You just see
Sorry, well, you can have one for being the target. Okay.
Feel like dizzy.
That can be one. Jan? Yeah, yeah. All right, we'll keep going on here. So, the first rule that we like to talk about is what we call the umbles. And it's just kind of a way to remember this. And so this is things like stumbling. So as you get into hypothermia, your body starts losing coordination, you stumble around. Little tasks become harder. So maybe, putting on a zipper or something and you fumble with that. Fumbling around with things, mumbling. So people tend to start slurring their speech. They're not being as crisp and clear as they might normally be. And then the last thing is attitude, grumbling. People start complaining about things. Oh man, why are we out here? How long is this gonna last? Can we do something else? Those are all signs that somebody might have hypothermia. Somebody mentioned uncontrollable shivering. See, that's when you can't stop. Normally you might be like, oh, it's a little cold and that's fine. It's where you start shaking and you just can't stop. That's something you worry about. Hands and feet start to feel numb, like, oh, I can't feel the ends of my fingertips, or my toes are really either sore or I can't feel them. So usually hypothermia kind of starts from the outer edges of your body and comes inward. So that's things like your fingers, your toes, your ears, or your nose, kind of more exposed part. Eventually, if it's bad enough, you'll start somebody seeing shallow breathing. So instead of your normal deep breaths, you'll have kind of thing where not normal. That's what we're gonna look for. And then last, if we let it go too long, somebody's gonna eventually pass out and go unconscious. So a really quick test. I haven't tried this myself in terms of feeling hypothermic, but this is comes from I think the Old Pick Guide, which is a scout thing that's no longer published. But the claim is if you can't touch your thumb to your little finger, that could be a sign of hypothermia. I think the idea there is it's a little bit of loss of coordination or maybe your fingers are getting kind of stiff. So we have two different types of hypothermia that we can do. We have mild and severe. So mild means that, yeah, you can tell me that you're cold or that you can't feel your fingers. You can still kind of do normal things. You can talk, you can shiver. And that's something that's kind of the mild side of things. But then we have the more severe. Severe is where you're out of it or passed out altogether. The body stops shivering. So shivering is the way your body tries to generate heat quickly. Once you stop shivering, then we've really passed into severe hypothermia. And severe hypothermia is something where we need to stop what we're doing and seek medical attention. And by medical attention, this probably means going to the hospital. So if we're on a camp out and somebody gets into severe hypothermia, we're probably stopping what we're doing. We're driving to the hospital.
One other symptom of hypothermia that was not on the slide, I don't think, is their brain will start to slow down and their speech will be constantly slurred.
Mhm.
So you
Mumble.
won't necessarily be able to understand them.
So what do we do if somebody gets hypothermia? Well, the easiest thing, if we can, is to get them indoors. Get them away from the outdoors where temperature is pulling heat out of their body. And that's if possible. Sometimes, depending on where we are, that might not be possible. We might be on a backpacking trip, for example, and we might not have an indoors to go to. So usually somebody who has hypothermia, oh, sorry, go ahead.
If you had a hypothermia like naked, you could wrap it around them.
We'll get to that one. So one of the first things, usually somebody who has hypothermia is allows themselves to get wet. Whether they were playing in the snow or it rained or something like that. So they might have wet clothes on. So we want to take those wet clothes off because wet clothes don't insulate as good as dry clothes. That's the first thing. The next thing we want to do is wrap them up, like I said, in a blanket or a sleeping bag. So we're going to provide some insulation to their body. So whatever body heat they're generating, they kind of use and keep on their body. If they can swallow normally, and sometimes they can't, well, we can give them something warm, non-alcoholic. And you kind of think back to those Bugs Bunny cartoons where the dog comes up and he's got the alcoholic and he gives the guy alcohol and he warms right up. Alcohol is actually a poor choice for hypothermia. It's not, it tends to make your blood vessels dilate out of the thing, which causes you to lose more heat. So normally, yeah, it's kind of a stereotype, but it's not something you want to do. And being scout trips, we shouldn't have any alcohol anyways. We want to give them something high energy, like a candy bar, because that's something that their body can take right away and start generating some energy, getting some energy out, and generating some heat with. So we'll talk about food a bit later, but candy bars are a great winter camp thing to have along. Normally, I'd say candy bars are not a great thing for a scout trip, but this is the one time where definitely. Another thing, again, if we're outdoors and we can't get them indoors, we want to keep them insulated from the ground. So one of the kind of hypothermia things that you need to think about is sitting on something like a rock or the snow, that transfers even more heat from your body. And so we want to insulate them. So that could be, again, like a sleeping bag. It could be like a closed foam pad, anything to get them off the ground. And then last, we want to warm the core of the body first before things like the fingers and toes. So next one we think about that's kind of stereotypical is frostbite. And frostbite means, it means that parts of your body are starting to freeze, which is not a good thing because we're not designed to do that. So, and like hypothermia, most of the parts that get affected are things that are on your extremities, like your fingers and toes, your ears, your nose, or your face, because a lot of times we don't cover up our face. And we talked about hydration before. The more dehydrated you are, the more chance you're going to get something like frostbite. So again, keep drinking your fluids.
Wait, not your body fluids though.
No. Okay, so symptoms for frostbite. At very first, you're going to get cold skin, which is kind of what you normally think. But if you ever started to have frostbite, which I actually had frostbite. You kind of got to the initial symptoms of it. You'll start feeling kind of pins and needles on your skin. That's kind of a sign that maybe your skin's getting a little cold. Eventually, though, if you let it go, the color will change, and it kind of depends on the person. But you can have kind of like different colors other than kind of whatever your normal skin color might happen to be, and it tends to also make the skin look a little hard or kind of waxy looking. Like with hypothermia, you tend to have some clumsiness as your joints and muscles tend to stiffen up if they freeze. And one of the things that can happen is you can get blisters after you warm it. So that tends to be more severe cases, but that's something that you can do. So what do we do to treat frostbite? Well, one of the things you got to think about is what are we doing? So again, if we're car camping and we know that Scout has frostbite, we're gonna get in the car, we're gonna take him to the hospital, or we're gonna go home. We can deal with that. But let's say again we backpacked in 5 miles. We're gonna have to backpack 5 miles out. Now we got to think about things because if we're gonna warm somebody up, we don't want them to refreeze again. So that's something we want to think about. So if we warmed up somebody at our campsite and then on the way back in they froze again because they weren't generating enough heat, that sets up some more complications. So one of the things, again, we want to use kind of low temperature water to heat things up. And the easy way to do is put your elbow in. If it feels too warm for your elbow in the water, it's too warm. So that's kind of an easy way to check, or if you have a thermometer, but I don't think most people bring one. One of the things as you're warming those parts back up, if they were really cold, it's going to hurt a lot. So this is a case where you want to have some kind of pain reliever on hand, especially if you're going to be hiking out or sledding out or something like that. Sorry, go ahead.
What kind of pain reliever? Are we talking like
Like over the counter,
or like some kind of rub?
Like over the counter, like I think I don't know, like or something like that. So again, if we're talking about feet, we have to think about, do we want to warm up somebody's feet if they're going to have to walk and potentially freeze again? And so it's okay to walk on frozen feet. So if somebody has a little bit of frostbite, it may be better to have them walk with that if it's to get out of whatever the situation is, then have them warm up and then potentially refreeze it again as we're walking out. So it's something you have to think about, because the second time that may incapacitate that person. So now instead of having somebody that's walking on frozen toes, you're carrying that person. So you have to think through this a little bit. And then another one is you don't want to rub frostbitten skin. You think, oh, let's rub it up and get a little friction going and we're going to warm it up that way. That's not a good idea. Another thing kind of coming back to hypothermia is wind chill. I've probably heard this. You'll see it nowadays. I think they say in the weather forecast something like feels like temperature. And basically what this is a calculation that says if we have the wind blowing and we're below a certain temperature, it's going to feel colder on our bodies because the wind's going to pull more, transfer more heat away from us than if there's no wind. And hopefully, you probably living in the Tri-Cities, you felt this. You go outside and it says it's 32 degrees, but it feels like it's about 10 degrees because you got a 20-mile-an-hour wind. So that's something you can usually on your app, on your phone, when you're looking at the weather, you'll have that feels like temperature. That's the wind chill. And that's what you need to take into account. Even though the thermometer says 32, the feels like or the wind chill temperature is what your body is experiencing. So when you're thinking about things like hypothermia and frostbite, that's what you need to look for. Just a little history tidbit here, kind of scout related. There's a gentleman named Paul Sippel, who years ago there was an expedition to the South Pole with, and they were looking for a scout to go along and represent the scouts of the United States, BSA at the time, to represent scouts going on this expedition. So he was actually, I think, like 18 or 19. He was an Eagle Scout. There's a national competition. He won that, and he went along down to the South Pole. And as a result of that, he kind of developed a fascination with it. Later, as an adult, he worked for the government to go down in several expeditions down there. And he and another gentleman came up with this concept of wind chill. And so they made the first kind of measurements and calculations to come up with that table so you know how your body's going to react to wind in cold temperatures. Another one that we might not think about is snow blindness. If anybody ever gone skiing and take your goggles off and it's really bright, yeah. So snow blindness is not really a blindness, but it's kind of more sunburn on your eyes. And so what happens is that we're outside, we're not really ready for it, and we're getting the light from the sun, but we're also getting light reflecting off the snow or the ice. And so it's kind of a double whammy if you want to think about it for your eyes. If you ever had it, you'll see symptoms like blurred vision. Your eyes get really sore, kind of swollen up. That for me is the classic snow blindness kind of symptom that I get. And it kind of gets to where you want to walk around with a squint because your eyes are kind of hard to keep them open. So the easiest obvious solution is to wear goggles or sunglasses. And it's not something, again, you think about it. It's cold outside, so why would that affect my eyes? But it's something to definitely look for. And then as far as treating that, you want to take like a cool wet compress and put it over the eyes, and that provides some pain relief. It's something that just goes away, kind of like a sunburn does, but something you need to think about. And so sunglasses are something that you should probably add to your list as far as winter camping. Just you may not need it, maybe it's cloudy like it is today, but anytime you have sun, that's definitely something to watch. Okay, so we're gonna take a little break for group question number 3. Okay, I'm gonna let you up first.
Walls, down, polyester, vortex, fleece, other synthetic material, nylon.
Sounds good. Okay, weird.
Okay, large coats.
Okay. Wool socks? Wool socks, that's not bad. Okay. What else we got here?
You wanna wear the proper fitting snow boots?
That's a good one. Ah, yeah, there you go. All right. See, done this? Oh, okay.
Okay, so some good materials are acrylics such as polyester or nylon, also natural materials such as wool, but absolutely no cotton ever. Down is good, but if it gets wet, all its insulation properties go gone.
Yep.
For clothing, you're gonna want 3 types of layers. Your base, which is going to be moisture wicking to keep the sweat off your skin. And then the middle layers, that's where your actual insulation comes in. And then your outer layer is entirely waterproofing so that you don't get wet.
Okay. And over here, one more?
Thermal underwear,
Uh-huh.
neck warmers, and waterproof boots.
Awesome.
She wants it.
All right, so let's talk about winter clothing. So it's something you want to think about before you go out camping, because once you're out there, you can't change your mind. So one thing I'm gonna say is I'll talk about a lot of different things. There's not really one right answer. It's what works best for you. Everybody's a little bit different. Some people run a little bit warmer. Some people, like myself, tend to run a little bit colder. So it's something you're gonna have to find out for yourself. But in general, we want layered, loose-fitting clothing. So we're not looking for skin-tight clothes, and we want to have multiple layers rather than one big heavy coat. So as a kind of a memory aid or tool, you can think of the word cold. So first thing, we want to keep our clothing clean. A lot of the materials that we'll talk about today don't work well when they get dirty. They have lots of little pores and microfibers that when those get clogged up, they lose their insulating properties. So you want to keep your clothes clean. As a general tip, you can buy, I think REI is the place that I usually buy it, but there's special detergents that are made to clean these types of fabrics. So if you find that your gloves, for example, over the years get a little bit colder, your mittens, you might try washing them in a tech wash type of thing that will clean those special fabric and kind of restore the insulating properties too. Number 2 is overheating avoidance. So we're going to be outdoors doing things like maybe we're hiking or maybe we're doing Klondike Derby where we're pushing a sledge around. So those are going to, body's going to generate heat. What we want to avoid is getting so warm that we start to sweat, because that's going to make our clothes wet, which we'll talk about. We want loose layers. So the reason we want to do that is we want to trap some air between those layers, and that air is going to act like an insulator. So if we have tight clothes, we're not really trapping air next to our body, so we're not going to get that insulating effect. And then last, we want to keep our clothing dry. So in addition to our body generating moisture that's going to make our clothing wet, we're going to be out in the snow or the ice, and we don't want that to get things wet as well. So it's one way to think about it. So when we think about layering, when we first get up in the morning, that's when we're going to be coldest, right? We've been sleeping all night, our body's kind of hibernating, not generating a lot of heat. So that's when we're going to put on most of our layers. And as we go through the day, we're going to start taking layers off. So maybe as we hike or we build a fire, do a service project, we're going to start taking layers off because our body's going to generate the heat that we need. But then, so what we're trying to do is be a little bit cool. We don't want to be so cold that we get hypothermia or frostbite, but we don't want to be warm. So we're just a little chill. And if we start to sweat, that means we have too many layers, right? That's a pretty easy one. And if you stop for a few minutes, like you're hiking along or maybe sledding or something, once you stop, that's when you start putting layers back on. So it's not a one size fits all, I'm gonna wear this one thing throughout the day. It's something that you have to think about and you gotta change with the conditions. So we talked about keeping your clothes dry, so snow eventually, if it's on your clothes, is gonna melt, and that's gonna make them wet. And wet leads to hypothermia, which is a bad thing because it means we're gonna stop what we're doing. And again, at the end of the day, your body kind of starts slowing down as you get ready for bed, so that's more layers. Plus, a lot of times wherever you are, the sun goes down if you're lucky to have sun, so it's gonna get a little colder. And then when you kind of as a little tip here, when you go to bed, I recommend bringing a pair of clean, dry socks just for bedtime. If you wear the socks that you've had all day, chances are your feet have kind of sweat or a little bit of moisture. And then if you get in your sleeping bag with that, now you've got wet socks on, that's gonna cool you off while you're sleeping. And then, of course, your parents probably always tell you this, keep your head covered. That's a pretty easy one to do. The thing that I found best is to practice this before you go camping. So don't wait till you go camping to try out your layers. The easiest way to do this is put your layers on, go outside and sit on a bench. And that's kind of your resting case where you're not generating any heat. That'll tell you if all of your layers together are enough for when you're not very active. And from that point, you can start walking around, and now I'm gonna generate a little bit of heat. So now if I take off a layer, do I have some, the layers underneath, are they enough? So that's a really good, easy way to do it. Just go outside, sit down for a while, like 15 minutes, and see if you're keeping warm. Another way you can adjust in addition to layers is things with zippers. So the clothing that I tend to bring all has zippers, rather than having like a pullover that I have to take off. That's kind of clumsy. If I have a zipper, I can take it off easier, but I can also unzip it like halfway down, and that's kind of maybe a little bit cooler. And if I get too warm, I can unzip it all the way. So just as kind of a tidbit, if you're looking for clothes, that's something I learned from. So some examples of layering. We got the two people here. Typically, like CJ said, you're going to start with some kind of base layer, and base layer is not just underwear or a t-shirt. It's usually something like long underwear. That's going to be what's closest to your skin. I think we've all seen that. I again, going back to places to buy stuff, this is my base layer I got from Costco. It's fairly cheap. This is some kind of synthetic. I'm not sure what, but let's see here. Well, it's synthetic. You can buy wool if you want to, depending on how your body does with it. But this is your base layer. It's going to be kind of underneath everything. Next up, we're going to have kind of your mid layer, which is going to be what kind of you wear around. That could be something like another shirt like this, which is just a synthetic shirt that's got a hood. Could be a regular pair of pants. And then we're gonna have an outer layer, and the outer layer is gonna be our thing that's gonna keep us dry. So for me, my outer layer is just a rain jacket. This is a pretty simple one. It's just a waterproof coating. It doesn't breathe very well, but it's waterproof. So if I'm out in the snow's not gonna get on my clothes, and it's not gonna make me wet. And for, if you're looking for the bottom half, my outer layer is just a pair of ski pants. They're a little bit insulated, so they're a little bit warmer. But the nice thing about these is they're waterproof. So that's something you can do. If you could, a pair of rain pants would work as well. But again, these are things that I can take on or take off, or put on or take off as I get warm or as I get colder. When we talk about clothing choices, if you take away nothing else from this, the phrase you should learn is cotton kills. And the reason is pretty simple. Cotton is a great thing. Jeans are great. Everybody wears them. Your scout pants, if you had kind of the old school scout pants, are cotton. But when it gets wet, it loses its insulating properties, and that's a big problem. So things you want to look out for are jeans, t-shirts, I don't know if anybody wears tube socks anymore, but kind of athletic socks. Those are, that's good that somebody does. Those are, once they get wet, they're kind of useless as far as insulation. So the thing that I think I heard people talk about is wool. And wool is a great natural fiber that can get wet a little bit and still retain kind of the insulating properties that it has. Some of the things you got to watch out for is some people it's kind of itchy when you wear it. That's kind of a personal thing. And then if that's a problem for you, I'd recommend looking at, there's blends of wool and synthetic materials. Those tend to have kind of the best of both worlds. They're not itchy, but they still have good insulating properties.
There's also merino wool.
Yes, yeah. In fact, that kind of brings that up. So I've got somewhere here. Let's see. Yeah. So this is This is a buff, which is, just kind of an all-purpose everything. This one's, merino wool, which is, it's kind of nice on your skin. It's not really itchy. I don't know if I have a slide for this. I'll just talk about buffs real quick. This is kind of all-purpose thing. I love these. I wear them all the time. You can put it on around your neck, so it can be kind of like a neck gaiter. You can put it up and wear it like a balaclava if you want. You can wear it as a hat. You can actually fold it over on itself and you can wear it as it does all sorts of stuff. So for me, for winter camping, I always have at least one of these. I've usually used one for sleeping at night, but you can use it during the day as well. They're light, so they don't take up much space.
So Costco special on the wool, they
Yeah.
don't have it right now, but I think in January, I've seen them. Costco puts out 100% merino wool t-shirt,
Oh,
like $20. Really?
There's like
20
this,
bucks?
this one.
Yeah,
Oh,
there's a women's one,
Oh, let's see it.
come and gone, but, and I've got this,
So, I mean, it's just a merino
It's just-
shirt.
but they're $20 and for that price, you can't
Yeah.
get 100% wool.
yeah, Costco's a great place for if you can catch it at the right time. They pick weird times of the year for stuff.
They don't have it yet. Keep waiting.
So polypropylene is a synthetic fabric. A lot of us have stuff like that. It's good in terms of, it's got good insulation. And the nice thing about polypropylene is that it tends to take the moisture that your body generates and kind of wicks it away from your body and pushes it out. So that the layer is good. It's a good base layer choice because your body just produces moisture anyway, even if you're not doing anything, and it kind of wicks that out away from your body, so you don't get wet next to your skin. There's other synthetics. There's a lot of different names. I won't spend a lot of time on them. Again, synthetics are kind of like, they do a little bit of everything. They've got good insulation. They don't absorb moisture. And if you do get a synthetic wet, it dries really fast, which is something to think about. Although I will say, keeping things dry is a better choice. If you've ever been out winter camping, things don't really dry that much. So I wouldn't, even though this says it dries fast, I wouldn't count on it. But the best prevention is really the best choice here. There's other things, when we talk about insulation, so we're talking about super thin fibers. These are, again, man-made materials. They tend to be a little thinner than natural materials would be. And they craft little pockets of air, and the air is what does the insulating. And they can be better than things like goose down, again, because they can get wet and they still have some insulating properties. So, for example, the gloves that I have and the mittens, these have a synthetic liner or material inside them. You can buy down gloves and things like that, but again, they tend to, once you get them wet, they tend not to work very well. Which leads us again into down. Down is actually a great insulator if you can keep it dry, and that this is kind of the dilemma you have, especially if you're talking about parents or scouters and looking at scouts. You have to decide, are they going to keep it dry or not? If they're going to be responsible for it. When we talk about sleeping bags, I have a down sleeping bag, and the choice I made was I'm never ever going to get my sleeping bag wet, because even if it was a synthetic bag and it's wet, I'm going home. So for me, that was a choice I made. But I've been on scout trips in summer camp, and somehow even in summer camp, they managed to get the bag wet. So yeah, that's a choice you have to make. That's why we kind of question mark there, not recommended for scouts. If you do look at down, the newer down that comes out, you can get a coated down that they put a coating on. It's usually called dry down. There's some other trade names, and that helps the dry down from clumping up when it gets wet. It's not perfect. It's still not as good as the synthetic, but it's better than just plain straight down. So when we talk about wetness protection, basically we're talking about our outer layer. We're trying to keep the moisture that's out there, whether it be snow or rain or ice, from getting inside to our clothes. And so this is something, you can look at something like Gore-Tex, which tends to be, or other fabrics like that, tends to be a little bit more expensive. The nice thing about Gore-Tex, of course, is that it lets moisture go out, but it keeps the rain and other stuff from coming in. But again, you have to keep it clean. There's things like coated nylon, which is kind of like the rain jacket I have here. This just has a coating on it, so it doesn't breathe at all. But again, it's going to keep you dry. And this is a little cheaper, or a fair bit cheaper than something like Gore-Tex. So the fabrics that breathe tend to be more expensive. So but it's not absolutely necessary that you have something that breathes. And then, last, if we're talking about costs, you can look at things like Frog Togs or other kind of cheaper rain suits. Those will work as well. The thing you have to consider though is they're trapping moisture in, so you kind of sometimes have to unzip them or kind of let them breathe a little bit because the moisture your body generates is not going to go out through those. Again, that leads us to ventilation. So whatever we wear, we want to have the moisture that we generate go out, and we want to keep the moisture that's in the environment from coming in. And so you usually need to have either fabric that allows that, or fabric, or we need to unzip or let things kind of naturally work that way. So ventilation is something you need to think about. We really don't want to be all sealed up tight, kind of waterproof. That's not really going to work for us. Again, now we're starting to talk about things like socks and underwear. Again, we're going to look at things like wool or wool blends or other synthetics. So yeah, this is where your cotton underwear, you definitely want to leave that at home. And this would be a time where, depending on whether you have synthetic materials for normal clothes, you might want to buy one pair of underwear that's synthetic. Again, on pants, same kind of thing, wool or synthetics or fleece. I haven't talked about fleece. Fleece is not a bad choice. It tends to retain some of its insulating properties even when it's wet, and it's just nice and comfortable. And like I mentioned, I use ski pants for my pants, kind of the outer pants. I'll wear something, the pants on the inside, I'll wear some kind of synthetic pants that I have. And then these will be on the outer side. As far as fleece, for me personally, this is my go-to kind of second to my base layer is a fleece jacket. It's got a zipper on it so I can kind of control the temperature on it. I've got a hood, so in addition to whatever I'm wearing on my head, like my hat, I've got a little bit of extra insulation. And then usually for me, I'll put on a jacket, and this is a thin puffy jacket that's a synthetic insulation, and that kind of provides a little bit more warmth, and again with a nice zipper. So I can unzip this first, and if that's not enough, I'll take it off, and then if that's still not enough, I'll unzip that, and you can kind of see how I take my layer. But the alternative would be something like this, which is just this is a really heavy coat. This is probably, I don't know, feels like 5 or 10 pounds. The bad part about this is it will definitely keep me warm, but once I get hot, all I can do is unzip it and take it off. I don't really have those kind of layers or choices that I can go through. So this is kind of your old school bundle up approach. The other thing is that these three jackets that I have here actually keep me warmer than the big heavy coat. So not only am I flexible, but I'm staying warmer anyways. So. And then we're going to talk about our feet. And boots is this is something that's kind of a little bit, when we're talking about price-wise, that we have to think about. So I have these are a pair of cheap boots, but you'll see that they have a kind of a wool felt liner in them. So they're insulated, so they're a little bit warmer than just a pair of regular hiking boots. So I would suggest looking for something like that. These actually were, I think, a Target special years ago, and they managed to last me if my feet don't grow anymore. So that's pretty easy to do. But insulated boots are definitely something that's useful. Sorry, go ahead.
Could you pick up one of those?
Oh,
so
sure.
Girls can see.
Sure.
You can buy them at.
Yeah, so you can see here that, this has on the liner here, if you guys can see it, not very exciting, but it's, the nice thing about this is that liner provides a little bit extra warmth on your feet, and my feet tend to get cold. So, this is like I said, this was a fairly, you can buy really expensive versions of these if you want to, but this is a kind of the cheaper Target knockoff version. So the one thing I will say though is that, especially with scouts, and most scouts are growing a lot and changing, buying a pair of winter boots for one season is kind of expensive. So what you might think about doing as a troop, which our troop did, was having a closet of older boots. And since the scouts wore them a couple times a year, maybe, it was something that scouts could come in and check out and check back in. And we had a collection, I think over time, we eventually got about 20 pairs of boots of all different sizes. And that's one way to have insulated boots that people can use without being a big expense to everybody.
I have noticed, I went out to find those mucklucks the other day, and the women's mucklucks are a poor selection. They don't have that removable liner often, and they focus more on getting a fuzzy on the outside and all that sort of stuff. I had to look pretty hard, unfortunately. They didn't have them at Fred Meyer.
Ranch and Home has them.
Ranch and Home, you have to go to a specific outdoorsy store to get women's mucklucks. They'll have them for men, but they don't have.
The other thing, this style is called a muckluck style, and the other thing that's nice about this is the bottom is a solid rubber, so you can kind of trudge around in the slush, and the top part is not, but as long as you don't get above the level of your ankle, you're gonna keep your feet dry. So that's another consideration with boots is some kind of waterproof boot. And that could be, again, if you're looking to save some money, that could be a pair of regular hiking boots. And if you buy a cheap pair of rubber rain boots and put them over, now you've got the hiking boots kind of for not much insulation, but you've got the kind of support. And then you've got the rubber rain boot over the outside. That's keeping your foot from getting wet. So again, feet are definitely something you want to keep dry. I've started to feel hypothermia in my toes once, and it's definitely very painful. Frostbite. It's painful, number one, and two, I don't know about anybody else, but I hate being cold, so this was my solution. And then when you get in your sleeping bag at night, I recommend that you keep your boots in your tent. So this means you're going to want to brush any snow or ice off your boots because you don't want it to melt inside your tent. And one way to keep your boots from freezing, because I don't know if you think what happens, but all that moisture that's in your feet now gets into your boot. And when you leave your boots out overnight, that boot is now frozen solid. And trying to put that on is not very pleasant. One year, Brian Conklin, our scoutmaster, did that as a demonstration to the scouts. He left his boots outside. He had a devil of a time trying to get those boots back on his feet in the morning. And then not only that, you can get them on, now they're really stiff and they're not flexing at all. So if you put them underneath your sleeping bag, that kind of tends to keep them a little bit warm. So when we wake up, they're nice and flexible. So it's easy tip. Talked about jackets a little bit already. Again, the kind of usual suspects of fleece, wool, and synthetic. And again, my windbreaker is just a kind of a fairly cheap nylon with a coating on it. You can buy really expensive rain jackets if you want, several $100s, like $300. They'll breathe and do everything. They'll weigh almost next to nothing, but you really don't need to spend that kind of money. Again, you'll need something on the outside, a coat or a parka. I tend to move away from kind of a big heavy coat, and personally I've kind of switched to layers. But again, you can, the same types of things apply to a coat as well. So let's talk about a hat. I would also suggest that you bring something for sleeping, even if you have like a lumber bag, because your head, depending on how you sleep, your head might come out of the bag, and even depending on the sleeping bag, there may not be much insulation up around the head area. So something like this is another wool blend type of cap that I've had for the longest time. But it's just a nice simple thing I can pull where it's nice and light, number one, but it's got really 2 layers of wool, so it's nice and warm. But it's something I'll wear at night when I go to bed because I don't want my head to get cold. The buff I talked about earlier, wherever that went, this would be another choice depending on what the temperature is. Fold this stuff into a hat and fold it down over my ears. But the other thing is, again, we want to protect our ears because they tend to be some of the areas that get frostbite easily. Gloves and mittens are obviously something we'll have to have. There's all sorts of different choices in those. I personally tend to go with mittens because you keep all your fingers together, so it's a little bit warmer. And both the gloves and the mittens I have a pocket on the back here that if you unzip this, you can tuck one of those warm hands heaters in there, and it provides a little bit of warmth. Again, I'm somebody that my fingers get really cold. So I actually went to the doctor once for it. They said, no, it's all in your head. But sorry, go ahead.
I use these gloves. You put them in and you can have this, or you can Velcro this.
Yeah.
And make them mittens.
That's an excellent choice. So yeah, I was gonna say that the disadvantage to gloves is, mittens is that your fingers are all stuck together, so you can really only kind of grab things kind of like a lobster. But you can also go with gloves. In either case, one thing that I would recommend looking for and thinking about is a liner glove. So this is a really thin wool liner glove that's really thin. So I can put this on and then I can still fit this into my mitten here. So now I'm layering with my hands. So layering isn't just your clothes that you wear. But the nice thing about this is if I need to do something to fiddle with my fingers, like say I'm going to light a stove, I can't really light a stove with my mittens. But when I pull this off, now my hand is still protected a little bit with this, and I can do whatever little fiddly things I need to do, and then I can put it back on in here. It's another benefit of this is that it's kind of absorbing the moisture. Again, if I'm generating any moisture, so my glove or mitten itself is staying dry. A cheap choice for this could be something like, again, going back to Costco, they have running gloves, and these are thin kind of gloves like so, or like these. They're a little bit of insulation here, not an awful lot, but depending on how big your gloves or mittens are, you can still fit that in there. And again, pull your hand out, it's covered, so you're not sticking it out. Another thing for gloves and mittens is I recommend at least 2 pair on any trip, because depending on what you're doing, you're probably going to get one pair wet. You might be making a snow shelter, you might be shoveling snow for some other reason, or just playing in the snow, having a snowball fight. So 1 pair of gloves or mittens is probably going to get wet. You're going to need to have a backup pair. One thing you might think about are hand warmers, and one choice are these little liquid fueled hand warmers. They're, I would say, personally not recommended. They do produce heat, so they do what they say, but they're a little bit hard to get lit. One of the disadvantages is you can't turn it off. So once you light this, it's going to burn all the fuel inside. So you can't turn it off. It only has one heat setting, which is whatever it is. There is no control over it at all. And the fuel it has tends to be a little smelly, so that could be a consideration. Since the guide to safe scouting says you can't have liquid fuels in tents, you can't bring it into your tent, so it's another thing. So in general, I would say not recommended. They are dirt simple. There's not much to go wrong with these, but there's a lot of kind of fumbling around to get it going. So you say, all right, well, what do I want to do? Well, the other option then, and we have this as a prize for one of the quizzes if somebody wants, you can buy fairly cheaply these little hand warmers. I'll see if I can turn this on and I'll pass it around. These are battery powered. I think it's starting to, if you guys want to just pass it around. They're fairly cheap. You can buy, again, this was an Amazon Black Friday or something special. So I think 2 of these were like $20. The nice thing is you can turn them on and off. So if your hands are warm now, you can turn it off and you don't have to waste the energy. They have different levels of heat output. So unlike the other, you can make them a little bit warm, really warm. You have some control over it. Some of them, the fancier ones, you can actually use as a battery charger. So you can bring along, charge your phone.
I just got the socks
Oh,
at Costco. They're $50.
oh,
We went camping and it rained and I was so hot. And my tent the water went through,
oh,
but I could not feel cold because I ended up waking up and my socks were so wet, but they were wool battery socks, and I was so hot. So I didn't even know I was all wet, but they worked so good. It's worth it, you guys.
yeah, oh, really? I haven't tried those. I look at them and every time I move over it. Yeah, I've seen the gloves.
They have them at Kroger.
Oh, okay.
She's going back to get
So those hand warmers, again, depending on the model and how expensive they are, they tend to run about 6 to 12 hours. You can charge them back up again if you have another battery. That's kind of what I've switched to. You can even find fancier ones that, in addition to charging, they have a flashlight built in. So, but yeah, the prices on those have come way down. Like I said, I think those were about $10 each. So I would say you really only need just one. Because you can switch to between pockets, so having 2 would be kind of overkill. I think everybody's seen the chemical hand warmers. These are great because there's nothing to go wrong. And as far as the adults or scouters, I would recommend having a box of these because they're kind of a cheap way to keep scouts warm. You can put them in everything, right? Everybody, hopefully, if you didn't, let me know. Got a kind of door prize of some toe warmers. So those are another option. They also make larger warmers like, about like this big, and usually they have a kind of a adhesive on the back. They're great for sleeping. So you get that activated, slap it on your stomach, and now you've got kind of a heater that goes to bed with you. So another prize that we've got in here is a whole bag full of different warmers. So there's like a hand warmer, toe warmers, foot warmer, stomach warmer. And the other nice thing about those is they're cheap. So there's really nothing to go wrong. The only thing is they obviously generate some waste. Everybody should have time to write down a few things. Okay, so what do we got? Right here.
You guys, pancakes, oatmeal, and
Oh, MREs. Okay, MREs is a good idea. Yeah, in the back there. Oh, what is-
warm drinks, soup, warm soups.
all right. Over here. Right here. Excellent choice. Yes.
Oatmeal and burritos.
Oatmeal. Burritos is a little bit challenging, maybe, but yeah.
Granola bars and dehydrated food.
Okay.
A mountain house.
Mom house. Okay. Those are all good answers. Oh, you got one. Sorry.
You too.
Go.
Dehydrated refried beans and like chicken. I see like tacos.
Oh, okay. With the hats there. All right. And
Oh, what about charcuterie board?
that'd be a little bit challenging, but okay. All right. So, we're gonna talk about winter food and cooking gear, which is a little bit different than what you might think about for your normal camp out in the summertime. So, got a couple rules here. So the first rule is keep it simple. If you think about what you're doing, you're outdoors, you're cold, you may not be very coordinated, so this is probably not the time to make that really fancy steak dish that requires a lot of preparation. Really what you're gonna want are things that are fewer dishes, because another thing is, when you're done with whatever you're cooking, you gotta clean up, right? So nobody wants to, at least my experience, nobody wants to clean up the pots and pans in the winter because you're cold, it's water, so might get wet. And it's a bit more work. We want things that are faster and easier, right? Because we want to get that energy, and we're standing around out in the cold. I want to eat, and I want that warm soup now. I don't want to wait while you cut up potatoes and maybe you grill the chicken. I want it now. So what we want are things that are really simple and fast. If you're really feeling up to it after you've had some experience, then yeah, you can make something that's a little bit more complicated. You can try that pizza or something that you really want to do. Some people mention foods that don't freeze. I think that's an excellent thing to remember. Dry foods don't freeze. So that's something to think in mind. If whatever you're bringing is going to freeze, that could add more time to your meal prep. And again, when people are standing around waiting for that warm food, they want it now. We talked about it before, and I'll say it again, we want to drink a lot. We talked about the hydration science. And one of the things our troop always does is have a stove going almost all the time that's got a big kettle on it full of water at kind of a slow boil. And so that way, during the day, if somebody's cold, they can walk over, pour themselves a cup of hot chocolate or warm Tang. Does anybody know what Tang is? I know the adults do.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's all right. Warm Tang is great stuff for wintertime. Another thing that my mother used to do was warm Jello. It's not Jello that was solidified, but just to drink it. But at any rate, having that stove going with a big pot of water or coffee pot going is a great thing to have during the day. I highly recommend that, especially if you're car camping. If you're backpacking or snowshoeing or something like that, that's a little bit harder, but something to think about. So another rule is you need to eat a lot more food. So this is one of those times where it's okay to pig out a little bit because your body's going to be producing or running through more calories because you're producing more heat, so that's energy. You're moving around a lot more outdoors, right? You're doing activities, building a snow shelter, sledding or skiing. Those require more energy. So we need to eat more food and more calories, and we need to plan for that as well. So you don't want to show up with 3 candy bars for the whole weekend and not have enough energy because you're going to be cold and miserable. So they've had this kind of winter food pyramid, which is a little bit different than what we would normally plan food around. We've got the water at the top. So again, we want to be drinking 3 to 4 quarts of water, which again, 1 quart is 1 Nalgene. So plan on drinking at least 3 of these a day if possible, which means you probably go to the bathroom a little bit more, but that's a good thing as far as dehydration and hypothermia. We only have about 20% protein, so we'll talk about what those are in a minute. And this is one of the times where we want to have more fats and oils than we normally would. And normally fats and oils are something we kind of try to minimize in our cooking, but for winter camping, we want to add a lot more of that. And then last, we're going to have carbohydrates, a lot of carbohydrates. Those are kind of something your body will break down really easily. So we'll start with carbohydrates. About 40% of your meals should be carbohydrates. They're a quick, efficient energy source for your body, which means that after you eat it, your body's turning that into energy really quickly. And it doesn't require a lot of effort on your part. So when we talk about carbohydrates, anybody got any examples that they might think about?
Breads.
Bread, okay, I'll let you pass out some more stuff here. In the back there? Noodles? Noodles are excellent, yes.
Macaroni.
Yeah, noodles, okay, another one? Crackers, okay.
Instant potatoes.
Potatoes are another one.
What was the question?
Starch, so carbohydrates. Okay, so some examples that people mentioned, we have pasta, grains, which are things like bread, fruit, and starchy vegetables. And when we think of starchy vegetables, we're mostly talking about things like potatoes or yams. Those are all good things to have a big part of your meals based around, because they'll give you that easy energy. Fats and oils are another thing that normally we probably wouldn't have that much of, but they're a high density food, meaning that they pack a lot of calories in a small amount of space. They're a little slower for your body to convert to energy than carbohydrates are, but you kind of need to have a little bit of both. You want some energy that you get right now, but I want some energy maybe in an hour or 2 or 3 while I'm out playing in the snow. So it's kind of a mix of both. So does anybody have any examples of fats and oils?
Maybe olives.
Olives could be, yeah. So I'm just gonna let you do it. Pass down. In the back there? Meat? Yeah, meat is example. Yes, good choice.
Marshmallows?
Marshmallow can be more sugar. I think.
But they're good.
Yeah. Okay.
Like butter.
Exactly. Butter. Yes.
Vegetable oil, things that you cook in oil.
Vegetable oil. Right.
Like a really rich food, it's probably got a lot of fat in it.
Yeah, probably. All right. Well, we'll pick out one more. Fish. Yeah. So these are things like cheese, one that didn't get mentioned. Is a good example of a thing that's got a lot of fat and oil in it. Nuts, and nuts are a great one because it doesn't freeze. Cheese you can freeze. Nuts are something that generally you can take outside and you don't have to worry about keeping them warm. Butter was mentioned. Peanut butter is a great source, but again, you can freeze peanut butter. So one possibility for peanut butter is powdered peanut butter. It's a little bit more work. But it's stable, and again, it's dry, so it's not going to freeze. And of course, meat, which is kind of our classic thing. But again, meat is something you're going to have to keep warm, or it's going to freeze. And last, we talk about proteins. So these are again another high density food. Again, even slower than carbohydrates, but typically we're going to make this kind of a smaller part of our diet because really what we're looking for is energy. So. You got examples of proteins. Let's see. Somebody who hasn't answered yet. There.
Meat.
Yeah. Meat's got protein. Sure.
Protein bars.
Protein bars. Okay. Okay. So let's see. Who hasn't answered? Oh, right here. Nuts. Yeah. One more. In the back. Chicken's got some protein. So meat is a kind of classic protein. Cheese we talked about. Beans. Beans would be another one. One that didn't get mentioned is eggs. Kind of your typical scouting breakfast. Nuts and seeds, whole grains, milk products. So these are all choices that we can get for protein. But again, we want to think about how suitable are they as far as when they get cold. Things that freeze are not necessarily the best choice. Fruits and vegetables are another thing that we want to bring along, but a lot of fruits freeze. And again, nobody wants to eat a frozen apple. So this is where you might look for things like dried fruit or dried vegetables, things like carrots and oranges. And since we may not want to bring along actual fruit, this is a case where maybe we want some type of vitamin drink or fruit drink. This is where like your Tang or maybe other things like that. We'll get that same vitamin C and other things that we would get from the fruit, but it's not something that we have to worry about freezing. And this is the best part, snacks. And definitely winter camping is one place where you can't go wrong with too many snacks. One reason is between meals, you might start to get a little cold, and a snack is kind of a quick way to get some energy, and your body will start warming back up with that. So it's something I recommend. Not only do you have as a troop or a patrol, but something that you on your, as an individual scout have, maybe in your pockets, you might have a candy bar or a bag of trail mix or some nuts. So that once you get a little cold, you start eating a little food, you'll warm back up. The other thing that, I've never tried this myself, but I've been told that if you eat a candy bar before getting in bed at night, you'll sleep warmer. I can't confirm, but I've never done it, but that's supposedly what the thing is. I've also heard the other way around, you should eat a candy bar right when you wake up in the morning, and that'll give you that energy to kind of get home.
Okay, so what that thing actually is, I don't know about candy bars, but if you suck on a hard candy like a lifesaver when you're going to bed,
Yeah.
that is providing an active release of energy, so that is keeping your body warm.
So something to think about, but definitely maybe more so than normal scout trips. Think of snacks because you kind of want to have a lot more calories just in general, but you want to have them ready to go.
Something that when I've gone camping, the sticks that like.
Oh, yeah.
Beef jerky.
Yeah.
You'll get me quick.
Yeah. Yeah. One more back. Beef jerky, yeah, that's what she, yeah, good choice there. So again, it's something that generally you don't have to worry about freezing too much, although it does have a little bit of water content. Sorry, Scott.
If you're, I don't recommend the Costco trail mix because unless you want to bring a knife or scissors along, because you cannot open their packs with your bare hands.
Okay.
You can probably buy sunflower seeds or other types of seeds that are salted or
Yeah.
covered in honey, or honey roasted sunflower seeds.
Yeah, nuts are a great choice for wintertime because they don't freeze, so.
I said seed, but yeah.
Seeds, nuts, yeah. Sorry, you back there? Yeah, yeah. All right, so one more and we're gonna move on. What's that? Kit Kat would be great. Again, candy bars are great. And this is the one time where I would say that as scouts, you guys ought to be planning some candy bars in your meal because you need that energy. So, all right, I'm gonna move on, but we can come back.